All right, let's dive into one of the most epic, sprawling, and honestly brutal stories in all of human history, the story of Russia. We're talking vast forests, unforgiving winters, and a people forged in the fires of invasion, tyranny, and revolution. So that's the big question, isn't it? How does a nation endure so much, time and time and time again? It's this incredible cycle, almost like a phoenix rising from the ashes, a relentless pattern of total collapse and unbelievable rebirth. So, where did this all start? Let's find out. Okay, so our story doesn't kick off with some grand established empire. Nope. It begins with scattered tribes, endless forests, and winding rivers. This is the very beginning, the birth of what would become the Russian state, the Kievan Rus. And that phrase, cradle of civilization, is absolutely key here. The Kievan Rus, which was actually established by Viking princes, the Varangians, wasn't just a kingdom. It was the cultural and political wellspring from which modern Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus all trace their roots. And its heart, its center of gravity, was in Kiev. Okay, now this is a moment that literally shapes the next 1,000 years. In the year 988, Prince Vladimir the Great makes a monumental choice. He adopts Orthodox Christianity. And this wasn't just about religion. This was a massive geopolitical pivot, aligning his entire civilization with the powerful Byzantine Empire. It shaped everything, Russia's art, its alphabet, its very soul. But, just as the Rus civilization was hitting its stride, a storm was gathering out on the eastern steppes. A storm called the Mongol Horde. In 1240, they did something that no one thought possible. They swept in, sacked, and burned Kiev to the ground, completely shattering the Kievan Rus and plunging the entire land into a dark age. Think about that. For 200 years, the Russian lands were essentially vassals, forced to pay tribute to the Mongols. This long period of domination, known as the Mongol Yoke, was just devastating. But something interesting happened during all this. It forced a power shift. And out of the ashes, a new center of power quietly began to grow. A small, unassuming northern city called Moscow. And that, right there, brings us to part two, the Age of Tsars. Once the Mongol yoke was finally thrown off, Moscow was perfectly positioned to forge a whole new kind of state, a centralized, absolute autocracy. And who's the guy at the center of all this? Well, he's one of the most complicated figures in all of history. Ivan IV, much better known as Ivan the Terrible. He was Russia's first ever official czar. On one hand, he massively expanded Russia's borders, but on the other, his reign was marked by terrifying paranoia and a brutal secret police that unleashed just waves of terror, glory, and madness, all in one. So, after Ivan dies, things get chaotic. It's called the Time of Troubles for a reason. But out of that chaos, a new dynasty emerges in 1613, the Romanovs. And man, they had a long run. 300 years that saw incredible highs, like Peter the Great's reforms and the stunning defeat of Napoleon, and ended with the final czar just walking away from the throne in 1917. But inside that long dynasty, one guy, Peter the Great, just explodes onto the scene. He was an absolute force of nature. He looked at medieval Moscow and basically said, nope, this is the past. He wanted a modern European future. He literally dragged Russia kicking and screaming into the modern age, building a navy where there was none, creating a modern army, and even founding a brand new capital, St. Petersburg, to be his window to the West. So, Peter's reforms created this massive, powerful empire. But as we're about to see in part 3, this glittering empire was basically a volcano, with immense pressure building up just beneath the surface, waiting to erupt. And here's the dark secret, the massive contradiction at the heart of it all. For all the glory of Catherine the Great's golden age, for all the battlefield victories, the entire system was built on the backs of millions of serfs who were treated as little more than property. This deep, deep injustice was the kindling for the fire that was about to come. And that fire? Well, World War I was the match that finally lit the fuse. The incredible strain of the war just shattered the old Tsarist regime, and into that chaos stepped Vladimir Lenin and his Bolsheviks. They had a simple, powerful, and brilliant slogan, peace, land, and bread. In October 1917, they seized power, and just like that, the 300-year Romanov dynasty was history. And just like that, we're in a completely new world. Welcome to Part 4, the Soviet Century. The old empire of tsars and divine right was dead, and in its place rose a new kind of empire, one built not on bloodlines but on ideology. I mean, look at this. The change wasn't just big, it was total. The ruler went from the czar to the party. The official ideology flipped from Orthodox Christianity to state-sponsored atheism. The capital even moved back to Moscow. It was a complete and total upending of an entire society. This new Soviet state was then tested in the most brutal way imaginable during World War II. And the cost of victory over Nazi Germany, it's just staggering. That number, 27 million. 27 million Soviet lives lost. It's almost impossible to even wrap your head around it. That incredible sacrifice became a sacred core part of the Soviet identity, a source of immense pride, and of course, unending trauma. So after the war, you've got the USSR as this global superpower locked in the Cold War. And this is where the great paradox kicks in. On the surface, you see these incredible scientific triumphs, the first satellite in space, the first man in space. But underneath it all, the economy was stagnating, and political repression was just brutal. The whole system was rotting from the inside out. And then it just ended. In 1991, this empire that seemed so permanent, so indestructible, it just dissolved. The Red Empire was gone. Poof. And once again, Russia found itself in the ashes, facing a completely new and uncertain beginning.
Which of course brings us right back to our theme, and to our final part, the phoenix of ice and steel. From the rubble of the Soviet collapse, a new Russia had to be born, continuing this incredible, centuries-long cycle of destruction and regeneration.
You know, the 1990s were just wild. A chaotic, Wild West version of capitalism under Yeltsin that left a lot of people feeling poor, lost, and humiliated on the world stage. So by the year 2000, Russians were craving something else entirely. And the new leader, Vladimir Putin, promised exactly that, to reverse the chaos and bring back stability, strength, and a restored sense of national pride. So, where does that leave Russia today? Well, it's this incredible land of profound contrasts, isn't it? It's a place that holds on to its ancient Orthodox faith while commanding a modern nuclear arsenal. A nation of breathtaking ballet and brutal battlefields. It's a civilization defined by its past imperial grandeur and the harsh realities of daily struggle. A people truly forged by cold and an unbelievable capacity for endurance. And that all comes back to that very first question we asked. How does this nation keep surviving all of this? Maybe this quote really says it all. Through every single dark age, every invasion, every collapse, the pattern holds. Russia falls, and then, from the ashes of its own history, it rises again. A phoenix, forged by the ice of its winters and the steel of its will.